The apostle uses a very similar word in the 10th verse of 2 Corinthians 5. It's the very last word of the verse. And as I was studying this week, and as I looked into the various translations of this word bad, one of the commentators and also one of the lexicons said this word is the word used for the rising mists on a cool lake on a warm summer morning. And as I thought of those rising mists 25 years ago, vividly etched in my mind as I saw a whole city before my eyes evaporate to nothing because of the heat, I think of what Paul says in this 10th verse, that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body according to what he has done, whether good, or if you want to put that last word instead of bad, good for nothingness. There's a day coming, and I wish for you to join me briefly as Paul introduces us to the judgment seat of Christ. Just two facets for us to consider this morning. Verse 9, we have an ambition that is consuming. And if we want to be prepared for the judgment seat of Christ, Paul said, have one ambition that consumes your hearts and minds and lives and time and energy and resources. And finally, verse 10, he notes for us that we have an appointment that we mustn't miss. It's an appointment that is constraining. The first word in verse 9 that's interesting for us to note about this ambition we're to live by, as the apostle says, therefore also we have as our ambition. He is telling us that we are to be, by honor alone, activated to a motivation of, and look at verse 9, whether at home or absent. Now that doesn't mean whether you're down here in North Kingstown or on the road. It's talking about whether here at home or absent, we are to be pleasing to Him. It's talking about whether or not we're on the earth or with the Lord. And actually, when we're here on the earth, we're absent from His presence. When we're here, we're absent from our eternal lives. But we are either here or in our heavenly home to be, and look at the last part of verse 9, this is to be our ambition, to be pleasing to Him. Now, isn't it interesting that before He walks us up in front of the judgment seat of Christ, He says, whether you're alive or in the presence of the Lord, while you're alive and before He takes you, you and I are to have one singular ambition that carries us through life. What is that? To be pleasing to Him. Why? Well, Paul spent his entire writing life writing 13, no less than 13 New Testament epistles. And all the way through them, he uses the same weaving of ideas to prepare us for this day. Let me read to you from a very helpful book by Eric Sauer called In the Arena of Faith. And in one brief paragraph, he pulls together all the different motifs and all the different analogies and word pictures that Paul uses to describe our lives on earth. Is not the whole an astounding, many-sided picture of the race and completion of the spiritual life? The arena of faith, the training, the self-control, the ruthless denial of self, the entrance into the race course, the different kinds of contests, the racing to the goal, the boxing, the wrestling, the rules of the combat, Christ as the umpire, the danger of being disqualified, the peering of the victor before the exalted throne of the divine judge on that great day coming. It is out of His hand the victors will receive the reward, the crown, and the palm. The list of victors, or the book of life, the triumphal entry into a homeland, heaven, the banquet, the marriage of the Lamb, the festival, the gifts, the place of honor. In fact, scarcely one essential feature of the whole course of games has escaped the writer of the New Testament that has not been employed in their figurative speech. In other words, the entire beautiful portrait of ancient Greek-Roman civilization as it centered around so much athletic competition, so much of the daily preparation for those grand games that all the people love to attend, the apostle draws from that imagery and distills it down, and he says here, that we are all going to someday stand before the judge's raised seat. It's not the judge like in a criminal courtroom. It's the judge as in the one who is going to hand out the rewards at the end of a great athletic endeavor and contest. And he said, we're all going to stand there, and we're all going to have run a race. And the only thing that's going to be rewarded is verse 9, whether or not we have been pleasing to him. In fact, Paul's last words written, if you remember, from 2 Timothy chapter 4, as he said, I fought a good fight, I finished my course. Henceforth there's laid up for me a crown. It's amazing, those words he used, if you were to walk into the British Museum today, into the room called the Ephesian Room. There's a whole room up there of all the artifacts from Ephesus. The very first little tablet that they have brought back, that they have by the door as you walk in, has an inscription on it, and underneath is the translation of that inscription, and this is from an arena in the 2nd century in the ancient city of Ephesus. And that arena, as you'd walk in the arena, here's what it says. He fought 3 fights and twice was crowned with wreaths. Let me read you what Paul said. I have fought, agonizomai, engonis. I have fought the fight, the same words. I have finished the course. Henceforth is laid up for me the wreath of righteousness. The exact same wording as found on the arenas of the ancient Roman competitions. And Paul drew directly from what all the people could visualize of the runner and the boxer and those people involved in intense competition. And he said, that's what spiritual life is like for me. In fact, the commentator McLaren says, the struggle for eternal things is so important that life becomes a mere trifle when compared to the eternal weight of our future. You say, it's not a trifle for me. It was hard for me to get up and get to church this morning. It was hard for me to get through this week. That's true. But sometimes we have our focus down here. And like Peter, we start swinking into the waves around us instead of looking up at where we're truly headed. And the fact that we have, secondly, verse 10, an appointment that we mustn't miss. And we cannot miss because it's constraining.